Good morning. I'm David Lunt, and today we're going to talk about global cooling because we have had and talked about global warming and had all the warnings which it has given us for a long time now. It is past time that we started talking about global cooling. This pandemic, which we are in at the moment, COVID-19, is a consequence of global warming. And they are going to get worse. This is by no means the worst virus pandemic we are going to have in the future, particularly if we continue with global warming and allowing viruses to evolve as our population increases, as the social distancing decreases, we're going to get it. And with bats, we've seen them, their social distancing when they sleep is almost zero, but they're upside down. Their feet are holding on the top, their nose is down at the bottom. And when the hot air rises, it goes past their nose. So you have clean air coming up to your nose, around their bodies, which are in close contact with one another. It doesn't matter then, because that air is on its way out. It's rising, moving sideways across the cave where they're in, or under a floor, or in a roof, wherever they are. And then it's going out where it's going to die. Whereas we're the opposite to that. We stand on our 2 feet, we're up in the air, and the hot air is rising, and when we're social distancing, it's coming up to our nose, we're breathing it out, and we're standing still. The bats fly off during the night time. They've got wind shooting past their nose, so whenever they expire, the virus gets carted away. Us, it's the opposite. We breathe out, it drops down in front of our nose, and then we inspire it again, so we get more infection by the stuff which we're excreting out of us. And we put PPE, which we do need for social distancing, in front of us. If we're infected and in the asymptomatic time, then whatever we're excreting is staying around our nose and our face and is coming back down, being inhaled again. The consequence of that, we're likely to get not just an infective dose, but a fatal dose. And if we get a fatal dose, then we are part of the problem. We're not the helpers, as I've been all my life. We learn with advanced life support, look at hazards first. If you don't look at hazards first, you become part of the problem and not part of the solution. So facial masks, if you're in the asymptomatic phase, can be, so we're needing to look out to identify how we can find out whether a person's in the asymptomatic phase or not. But the important thing that we will come later, but at the moment is that we are interdependent upon plants. And plants we have abused for centuries. We have deforested large areas of our world, and we have increased the population of the world. We're now in the trillions. And that is what is causing these type of pandemics, and other diseases all follow in their wake. We've already had HIV, which we still haven't controlled. People live off medications, and they call that living with HIV. They are still very much handicapped by what they've caught. And the same thing can happen with COVID. The consequences of it, if you have it severely, can be with you for the rest of your life. So we need to kill it. We need PPE, but we also need what I call internal personal protection management. And that is killing the virus. PPE, which we've known up till now, hasn't killed the virus. We must kill the virus, and we must kill the virus in any stage of its life cycle. And to understand that, we've got to understand a little bit of biochemistry. We don't need to know it in a lot of detail. A little bit of detail will be ample. And this is the metabolic pathways, which when I was doing an MSc in 1967, was produced by Dr. E. Nicholson of Leeds University, and then written here. And we loved it because it showed the interrelationship between plants and animals. On the left-hand side here, you will see it's green. that's for the photosynthesis, that's of the plants. Then you can see the black, that's the carbohydrate, which is produced going down to the Krebs cycle and fatty acid synthesis further down on the chart, which is the energy being taken from the fixation of carbon dioxide and production of oxygen, and the oxygen, which is toxic to some organisms, but that is not for us. We want it, we need it to live and breathe. Okay, so we are dependent upon the plants. We also have interrelated pathways. We have amino acids, which are here in red, and then we have in purple the purines and pyrimidines, which go to form DNA and RNA. The amino acids are going to form proteins. You're having the genetic material, which gives us the template, which gives us the biodiversity of this wonderful planet we live on. So all of these things are interrelated, and they're all very important for us to understand, because it is showing this interrelationship which we've got. We cannot replace plants, but even in the future when we might be able to do it, it's probably going to be uneconomical. They are very efficient. We can fixate carbon dioxide efficiently nowadays, and we can fixate energy from the sun more efficiently than plants. But there are so many other things which the plants are doing, producing water, the atmosphere, they're producing rain, and the whole interrelatedness of these whole systems is what we've got to look after. But what is important about this is that we have a certain amount of air which is around us. And we know that from the social distancing we've seen, 2 meters. If you turn that into a volume, then it's 2 by 2 by 2, it's 8 cubic meters. So that is the minimum amount of air which we have to look after and make sure that it's sterile. And if we're making sure that that's sterile, we're not going to have COVID-19. But if we go into the trouble to do that, we might as well go to the trouble as well of making sure that we remove our fair share of carbon dioxide in that space which we occupy. That space, of course, is just not the only bit, but that we need in our home. So we need to take responsibility for our home, for our rest of our family. And if we take responsibility for home and the rest of our family, we are taking responsibility for society as well. Then it extends to your car, it extends to the bus, the train, the aeroplane, it extends to your workplace, it extends to places of leisure, places where you have to shop, and schooling and everything else are spaces. And those spaces, if each one of those spaces, the owner of it is responsible for making sure that within it the air is sterile and carbon dioxide is removed, then we will be removing the cause for the pandemic. We will also be preventing future pandemics, and we will create a world in which we can all live. The population explosion is another thing which we have for years had family planning, and now we seem to be welcoming more and more people to come and live in a smaller and smaller environment because of the economics of living closer and closer together. The economics of living closer and closer together is fine, but then we've got to use those economics to make sure that that space and the rest of the world space is not warming, that we're talking now about global cooling throughout all of that. So now there are things that we've got to look forward to and things that we've got to do. And one of those first things that we've got to do is to make sure that we understand the interrelationship here of all these organisms. Because proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids are things which all these animals require, whether it's the plants which are growing and are not motile, whether it's us who are motile and living off the plants. We are dependent upon them. They are in fact our extracorporeal organ. And if we don't keep them and the biodiversity, which all has these metabolic pathways, then we are not going to have the world which we love to live in at the present and which we need to cherish and make sure it is safe for our children in the future. So there are going to be another more videos which I'll produce. The next one will be on how to identify the infection earliest, and then I will again be speaking about the interrelationship and this metabolic pathway. I'm sure it's not as clear as you would like, but it's too big. To get it up to this size, we've got to be talking about individual things, and we will be starting to talk about individual things and cofactors, which are so important, as they are also important for these pathways in different organisms as well. So we need to start talking about global cooling. And when we start talking about global cooling, we've always got to make sure that we do it, and we've got to make sure that other people do it as well. If we do that, we have the technology nowadays to make sure that we can cool this planet, and we've got to start cooling the planet. Warming the planet has shown that it is going to eventually kill us off. It could easily kill us off. The bats now are living with it because they are small and they can excrete the virus before it kills them. We are far too large. And in all the extinctions which have taken place, we've ended up with smaller and smaller animals. So unless we want to have a world where the bats are the dominant feature, then it's probably better that we start looking for our own ways of cooling the earth and not leaving it to them, because they, at the moment, if we let the COVID-19 kill us off, then they are the ones who will be living with it, and more and worse pandemics will be developing. We have the intelligence, we have the knowledge, we have the technology. We now have to just set about cooling the planet and killing the virus. Thank you.